Now, as you may know, today is what is being called Disney Plus Day, or basically it's the 2-year anniversary of the launch of the Disney Plus streaming service, and they're celebrating by revealing and or giving us some looks at upcoming shows that will be on the platform. And before I even get to the Star Wars news or info, what little there was, let me say I wasn't a fan of the way they went about this, which was basically by posting periodically on social media instead of having any sort of hosted live stream event. I don't know, it just feels like they could have gone the extra mile and organized and presented this a lot better instead of leaving everyone kind of wondering what was going on and what would be announced when. But then again, I guess they didn't need any sort of real organization for Star Wars because there were basically no announcements. All we got was a minute-long sizzle reel of the upcoming Kenobi series, one that actually leaked a day early, which made this even more a bit of a letdown if you saw it yesterday and expected more today. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the sizzle reel itself was bad, and I'll talk more about it in just a bit. But I think more was expected here from Star Wars. I think most thought we'd at least get a look at Andor, which we learned yesterday was coming late summer of 22 most likely. But there wasn't even a mention of that or a mention of anything else for that matter, even other previously announced projects. And then in comparison, when it came to Marvel, which not only had some announcements for new shows we hadn't heard of before, and a lot of announcements for ones we had heard of before, but they also had a special on Disney Plus, which gave us a scene from the upcoming Hawkeye series and some small peeks at Moon Knight and She-Hulk. While for Star Wars, we got the Boba Fett special, which I thought was actually pretty good and interesting and worth watching if you haven't seen it yet. But it didn't offer any sort of peek at the book of Boba Fett, which I think a lot of people thought it was going to do. And that's partly disappointing, but partly appreciated because I am kind of excited about being kind of blind going into this series. I'm kind of happy we don't entirely know what is going to happen or what it's going to be about. It kind of helps build the anticipation. Though honestly here, I didn't know how much from Star Wars we'd even get, considering it was only last December that several new shows were announced and we haven't heard much about many of them since, like the Lando series, for example. Which means they're probably still early in development and they aren't going to announce a bunch of new shows until those are further along or closer to coming out, or so you'd imagine anyway. Then there's also the fact that next weekend is D23, the big Disney convention, so I'm sure it's possible, if not likely, some announcements for Star Wars are being held back until then. But still, you would have thought we'd get a bit more than we did, which again was just the Kenobi sizzle reel, though some seem to be expecting a Kenobi teaser trailer, and I didn't think that was likely at all, considering we just finally got a trailer for Boba Fett like a week or so ago. And I don't think they want to put too much focus on Kenobi just yet. They want people to get excited for Book of Boba Fett. But anyway, the sizzle reel itself I thought was pretty good. It was mainly a half dozen or so concept images, along with a few tidbits of information from Ewan McGregor and the director Deborah Chow, telling us that Obi-Wan protecting Luke is the starting point and we'll see where the story goes from there. And where it seems likely to be going, and this was heavily implied by a comment at the end by Ewan McGregor, is to another encounter of some kind between Vader and Kenobi, which is something I'll talk more about in a separate video, how I and others feel about the possibility of a third confrontation between the two and one sandwiched between the other two. I just put up a poll yesterday asking how people feel about that, and a link to it should be in the description below should you want to participate and leave a comment for me to potentially read in tomorrow's video. But anyway, it looks like the potential duel could end up taking place on Mustafar again. At least that's what the concept art kind of implies. It shows them on what I think seems to be Mustafar. It shows Vader in suit against an older Kenobi. Though with it being concept art, who knows if it's just something they threw together to see how it looks. I don't believe they would spoil the location of a third duel in a sizzle reel of all things, but who knows, maybe it does imply that it will take place on Mustafar, or perhaps it takes place through the Force and it'll be at many different locations. Who knows how this will play out, assuming they do indeed fight again. Either way, there were a couple images of Vader sitting in what I assume to be his castle on Mustafar, which is exciting. I would love to see more of that place, and I would love to see plenty of Vader in this series. In fact, I've been saying since the series was announced that I hope this is almost as much about Kenobi as it is about Vader's hunt for Kenobi. I mean, if we're bringing Hayden Christensen back, I really do hope they go all in with Vader. This is one of those times I think it's really appropriate to use him to the fullest extent, instead of just having him kind of lurk in the background or being the behind the scenes overarching villain, if you will. And so my guess here from this concept art, and I'm not saying I love the idea of Kenobi leaving Tatooine during this time period, but my best guess is that an Inquisitor somehow, someway comes across Kenobi on Tatooine. They'll fight, but the Inquisitor will get away. And once that happens, Obi-Wan will feel his best course of action is to lure Vader away from Tatooine and to lure him away from potentially stumbling upon Luke. Kenobi will then contact Bail Organa for help, and we do see what appears to be some sort of potential rebel base in the concept art. We see what, as a kid, I always just called snow speeders, even though they had to be adapted to the cold to use on Hoth, meaning they are more than just snow speeders. Anyway, it makes sense that Bail and Obi-Wan would still be in contact at this point. After all, Bail sends Leia to Tatooine in Rogue One to find Kenobi, and I'm going to assume he would be pretty confident that after 19 years, Kenobi is still there because he has been contacting him or in communication with him periodically. Either that or he's just hoping he's still there and sees him as a desperate last hope. Furthermore, I then think we'll see Kenobi trying to stay one step ahead of Vader, who is pursuing him across the galaxy. This will be a sort of game of cat and mouse where Kenobi doesn't actually want to get caught, but he doesn't want to completely get away, not too quickly anyway. He wants Vader to get the impression that he's always on the move, and that he hasn't settled down and could potentially be protecting something or someone, or was protecting someone or something on Tatooine. Eventually then, in the final episode, the two will meet up again, and in that separate video I'll talk more about the potential duel between Kenobi and Vader. But I think what we'll see is a reversal of the last duel. We'll see Vader defeat Kenobi and basically leave him for dead, though it'll all be part of Kenobi's plan. And somehow Kenobi tricks him into thinking he's going to die, and he again leaves him for dead but survives and goes back to Tatooine to protect Luke. And maybe he does all this with the help of Bail Organa. Who knows, but I do suspect that if they fight again, Vader wins, Kenobi is thought dead, so that Vader just kind of gives up on the hunt. The problem is that doesn't line up, or wouldn't line up too well, with what we see in the show Rebels, where Vader is still looking for Kenobi. He seems to think he's still out there, and maybe it's just me, but I get the impression that he hasn't found him or hasn't encountered him since Revenge of the Sith, but again, who knows how they'll work this all out. Anyway, for better or worse, that's my guess as to what this series will ultimately be or how it will play out. And I do know that's taking a lot away from a handful of concept images and a few words from an actor and the director. However, that said, I do hope it's much, much more than that. I do hope this is also about Kenobi trying to commune with Qui-Gon Jinn to begin his training to be a Force ghost one day, but that his anger at Anakin and his fear of losing or ultimately failing Luke is holding him back from all that it's preventing him from reaching out through the Force or hearing Qui-Gon, and that by the end of the series he lets all that go and his real training begins. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that if that's not the underlying premise of the show, I'm likely going to be pretty disappointed. I don't want this to be a surface-level adventure of Obi-Wan roaming the galaxy and ultimately confronting Vader again. I want it to really and truly explore the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi at this sort of transition point in his life, for it to be a bridge between prequel or Clone Wars era Kenobi and the guy we see in A New Hope, and the one we see in Rebels too, who has nothing but compassion for his arch-nemesis Maul. But anyway, I'll no doubt talk more about some of this in my next video that will cover my poll asking if you think Vader and Kenobi should fight again in this series, even though it seems like it's likely going to happen whether we like it or not. For now, I'll just say that, on the whole, it was a rather disappointing Disney Plus day for Star Wars fans. They gave us virtually nothing about the future of the franchise on this platform, other than the Kenobi sizzle reel. Again, not even a look at Andor, or maybe a look at Season 3 of The Mandalorian, just a peek at it, or any of the other upcoming projects we know about. Again, just a little disappointing, and certainly very underwhelmed. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of Disney Plus Day. Did you like the way they went about it? Were you disappointed or okay with the Star Wars news? What little we got. And how are you feeling about Kenobi after getting a little peek at it? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.